Can we just talk about my bedazzled book cover for a minute? You guys, I didn't think I would be making this much progress this fast, so I'm actually really excited about it. I have all of the light blue done. This dark blue, I almost wasn't going to do it a different color because as you can see, the dark blue is the shadows. I don't think it's going to translate very well with the bedazzle, but I decided to do it anyway just to kind of mix it up and give it a little flair. So I just have to do the dark blue and the skin. So I ordered the rhinestones on Amazon and I have not gotten them yet, but we're making some progress. Also, before we're going to start with chapter 11, but I want to talk about perfectionism because, I've talked more in depth about my childhood on these videos than I have anywhere else, but because of how my parents were, which the very short version is they were very emotionally unavailable, that caused me to be a people pleaser and perfectionist, among other things. But as a recovering perfectionist, I used to have this mindset like if I wasn't perfect, I wasn't worthy. And I felt like I had to do everything perfect or I wasn't good at it, which is also, I don't know if you guys are familiar with a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. But a fixed mindset is like, if I'm not immediately good at it, then I'm not good and I'm never going to try it again. Whereas a growth mindset understands that you become better at something by making mistakes and learning from your mistakes. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because as an adult, this is not the first art and craft thing that I've done. My friend Heather, who now lives in San Francisco, but when she lived here, we would always go to like arts and crafts types workshops, whether it was like mosaics or painting or whatever. And what I noticed as an adult, I would get caught up in that perfectionism that I had as a child because I hadn't done any arts and crafts since I was like a child or teenager. So I would immediately get into this perfectionism mindset that it had to be perfect. And if I made a mistake, I would feel a lot of shame about it. And so I went through a similar process with this bedazzle because this is the first time I've bedazzled anything. And I think a book cover is kind of an advanced thing to do when you're first starting out with bedazzle. I mean, I don't know, but I'm just guessing. And so it's not perfect. But in the moments where I would catch myself feeling shame or beating myself up, I would regroup and I would learn from my mistakes because this is what I tell my clients all of the time. First of all, awareness is key because we run on these subconscious patterns. Like I used to run on a subconscious perfectionist pattern all of the time. And then I would beat myself up and do all of the things. But now that I'm aware of it, I can immediately recognize it and shift my mindset. So for example, in the places where I made mistakes, so basically the biggest mistake I made is I needed different sizes of rhinestones. I only had one size of this. So there were some blank spaces where I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, but I kind of had to like double up. So it's kind of double layered in some spaces, which I use that as a learning experience. So it's like, okay, next time I bedazzle, if I bedazzle, or if I'm ever talking to anybody about bedazzle who hasn't done it before, that would be the advice I would give myself or someone else. Like, hey, get a few different sizes so then you can fill in these empty spaces instead of doubling it up. So I thought I would share that in case anyone else is a perfectionist or recovering perfectionist. Really, all it takes is self-awareness and having a growth mindset. And I don't know if you noticed, I call myself a recovering perfectionist because I'm never expecting myself to be 100% recovered, or in other words, 100% quote unquote perfect. I am a work in progress. I will never claim to be perfect. I'm not, as you can tell from my book, I am not perfect, but It's all about being a human being and having fun and enjoying the process, which is all about what running in slippers is all about. Because if you remember, running in slippers is a metaphor for life. It could be fun, playful, and adventurous, or it can be scary, painful, and dangerous. So the process of bedazzling this cover is very on theme with running in slippers. And on that note, let's get into chapter 11. So, if you may recall, chapter 11, or I think I alluded this at the end of the last video, this is the motivational seminar in Denver with Gary Vee and Tony Robbins. And there were a bunch of other speakers, which I'll get into that in a second. But the reason why this event is important is because I had already made the decision I'm going to move to Hawaii and be a writer, but I was terrified and I didn't know what to do. So I was like, I need to go to this seminar to get a kick in the butt. And going into this Denver motivational seminar, I had two main concerns about moving to Hawaii. One was my job, because at the time I worked in corporate America. My job was based in Chicago. However, I did work from home like 90% of the time. So I did feel like there was a good chance that I could ask my manager if I could work remote, because I also worked for a big global company. So a lot of people that I worked with were remote. That being said, this was 2018. I know it's like the trendy thing to do right now to work remote. This was not the case back then. So it was still a real big ask. And I was so terrified because I was convinced that he was going to fire me on the spot for being such a dumbass. But I will say, because I'm confident and courageous now, I was not back then, but at least back then I had gotten to the point where I was like, it doesn't hurt to ask, because the worst he could say is no. So one obstacle was my job, but going to this seminar, I was like, I'm going to be so delirious with motivation that my plan was the Monday after the seminar, I was going to go into the office. I think I had already scheduled the meeting with him and it was on his calendar. So I'm like, I'm going to go into the office and ask him if I can work remote. And it was all contingent on me being deliriously motivated from the seminar. Because if you know anything about Tony Robbins, like that's his whole thing. He's all about like, it's basically like a huge rah-rah session to get you motivated. So that was my only strategy, was just being delirious from motivation from this seminar. The other obstacle that I saw to moving to Hawaii, among many other things, because I also didn't have the money, but the other thing going into this seminar that was really terrifying about moving to Hawaii was I felt like, because I was at the beginning of 2018, I was 37 because my birthday's in June. So this was right before my 38th birthday. But the story I was telling myself was I was too old to make new friends. So all I envisioned was me moving to Hawaii and not having any friends and being all lonely and whatever, the stories we tell ourselves. So those things are important and we'll get to them. But anyway, so I fly to Denver and I get there, and it was kind of disappointing when I got there because I was so excited about this motivational seminar because I bought the lunch with Gary Vee option and the meet and greet with Tony Robbins. And there were other speakers like Robert Herjavec was there. And again, I'll get to that in a second. But so I'm so excited. And I get to Denver. And if you've ever flown into Denver, the airport is like in the middle of nowhere. So as you're landing, it's just like this huge barren field of like nothing. So I'm like, oh, this is very anticlimactic. And then another thing, because this was my first time going to Denver, I always thought Denver was in the mountains because it's called the Mile High City. Well, it's like, I don't know, 20, 30 miles away from the mountains. So like you can absolutely see the mountains, but it's not in the mountains. Like you would actually have to drive to go to the mountains. So that was also kind of anticlimactic because I thought, because in Hawaii, like for instance, you can't see out my window, but like the mountains are right there. Like I could literally probably walk. It's probably like 2 miles, but I could walk to the mountain range. It's not that far away. So that's what I was expecting from Denver. And it was not like that at all. So it was kind of anticlimactic upon the landing. And then I bought an Airbnb because I don't do Airbnbs anymore. They used to be very affordable, but now with all the fees and stuff, it's just cheaper and nicer to stay at a hotel. So I got an Airbnb, and it was actually a whole house. Well, when I say house, I think they're called duplexes. It's when there's like two houses together, but still it was like a nice size Airbnb because I had the whole house to myself. And usually how Airbnbs work is you communicate with the host, and usually it's a lockbox situation. So they just tell you like, oh, that here's how you get your key so you can get in. And we had done that, but when I was in the rental car driving to the Airbnb, he texted me. I think his name was Matt. Let me see. I call him Matt in the book. I think that was his real name. But he texted me and he was like, "Hey, I'm just getting off work and I was going to swing by the house to meet you. Are you there yet?" And being from Chicago, that I know it sounds really nice and friendly, but being from Chicago, I was like, oh my God, this is such a red flag. What kind of psycho host wants to meet their guests? Like, I thought it was such a red flag. But because I had no boundaries around things that made me uncomfortable. I'm also recovering people pleaser, so I still struggle with this. Although I think me now might have handled this situation a little bit differently. But he was like, "Hey, can I swing by and meet you?" And even though I was like, "This is so suspicious," I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'm on my way now." So he came by. I think I got there first. He was super nice and he was showing me around the house. Like, there really wasn't anything to show me. I mean, it's a house, I get it. But he was just being like super nice. And he was asking me why I came to Denver. And I was telling him about the seminar. And he was like, "Oh, too bad you're not staying longer." Because I think him and his friends were going to a concert or something over the weekend. And he was like, "Oh, too bad you're not staying longer because then you could hang out with us." And this is important because I don't think it really hit me until after he left, but I was like, did I just make a friend in Denver? And so that was that. And this was the night before the seminar. So I wake up in the morning and I was so terrified to go to this seminar because, again, I'm very confident and outgoing now. I actually enjoy my own company now. I enjoy traveling and doing things by myself now. That was not me back then. So, first of all, I was terrified about going to the seminar alone. I was also terrified because I had bought the VIP ticket and I felt so undeserving of being in the VIP. I felt like such a fraud. I had such imposter syndrome. Also, I can't remember exactly how this event was marketed, but however it was marketed, it was in a way that I was certain that it was going to be mostly entrepreneur type people or business owners. And I'm like, I work in corporate America. Like, I did want to write a book, which is an entrepreneurship type of thing. But again, I just felt like such a fraud. I'm like, this is so embarrassing. I don't deserve to be here. And I truly think if I had stuck with because just the lunch with Gary Vee option was $500. And I truly believe that if I had stayed at that ticket level, then I would not have gone to this event at all. But because I had paid like $2,000 plus the Airbnb and the flight and everything, the sunk cost made me feel sicker than the fear. So I was like, I'm just going to go. It's only a day. It'll be fine. I had to really talk myself into it. So I go to this event, and this arena, I can't remember the name of the arena. I should have looked it up before I did this video, but I believe it's mostly used for rodeos or things like that. But they had, of course, converted it into seating for this event. But, I get there and I check in at the VIP station, which just brought up so much shame and imposter syndrome. And then because I was VIP, there was floor seating and I could sit in the first or second row. So me now, I would have been sitting front and center, right? Me then, I was like, what's the furthest away I could sit, which in the VIP section is only the second row. So I sat in the second row. And me now, I'm kind of claustrophobic. I guess it doesn't matter in the first row, but because I was in the second row, I'm kind of claustrophobic. So I would normally choose an aisle seat. But sitting in the aisle felt like way too vulnerable and exposed. I did not want to be seen. I just wanted to hide. So I actually sat, I think, like 3 or 4 seats in from the middle row. and I'm sitting by myself and I felt uncomfortable, but it wasn't that bad because I was mostly just people watching and observing. And at some point, these two girls sat in front of me in the first row and they clearly knew each other and were talking. And then at some point, they turned around and started talking to me, and they were really cool and real nice. One was an entrepreneur, one wasn't, which further made me feel a little bit more comfortable. And then I remember at one point, because at the time, and I don't remember if I mentioned this in my other videos, I know I mentioned that the reason that I took the sketch comedy writing class at Second City is because I wanted to start a writing blog. But I eventually did start the writing blog, and I had an Instagram account for that blog that was actually kind of taking off. And I was telling them about it because I was like, oh, I came here because I want to be a writer. And they were like, oh, what's your Instagram? And we like all exchanged Instagrams and stuff. And so again, I had been telling myself like I'm too old to make friends. And I'm like, oh, like these girls are really nice. And it was really easy. Just even though they initiated the conversation, it was like really easy for me just to talk to them and have a conversation. Well, anyway, so the event started, and the initial speakers of the morning, they were good. They weren't like amazing. Like I said, Robert Herjavec was there. I re- I like him, so I don't want this to sound like a criticism of him, but I remember one of the things that he talked about was he signed up for a marathon, but he didn't really train for it. So of course it didn't really go very well. Which wasn't really motivating to me as a former marathon runner who did prepare for marathons, but it was really cool that he was there and I got to see him live. I remember there was this other man, he was a burn victim. There was like a gas leak in his basement or something, and he went in the basement and lit a cigarette, and the basement literally blew up. And I will say he's had a lot of really good plastic surgery on his face and stuff, but like he did show us like his arm or some other skin where he hasn't had extensive plastic surgery. And man, he was like a burn victim. So like his story was super inspiring because, you know, I have my own story, which we'll get to later, because I hit my own emotional rock bottom, and it is so hard to build your life from a completely different place, which is what he had to do. So I remember him being the most inspiring speaker because it's like he built a business, he became a millionaire and is doing all these great things now. And I so love stories like that because it's so hard to come back, and it's so inspiring to hear people who have done this, things like that. So he's like the most memorable non-Gary Vee, non-Tony Robbins speaker. So there were also breaks throughout the morning before lunch. And at one point there was a break, and I think I got up to go to the bathroom or whatever. And I came back to my seat and I was on my phone. But as I'm on my phone, there was someone came and sat next to me. But the guy who had been sitting next to me all morning was wearing shorts. And I could see out of the corner of my eye that the guy sitting next to me was wearing jeans. So I was like, who is this? So I look up and it's someone different. And he introduces himself. And I already forgot what I call him in the book because he is definitely a fake name, Mike. And he's like, oh, hey, I'm Mike. And I was like, hey, I'm Angie. And we were talking, and he was super nice and friendly. And admittedly, this is easy for me to say in hindsight because I was really feeling uncomfortable about being at this event alone. And he was there and he was being all nice and friendly. And I was like, oh, so where are you sitting? He was sitting in the cheap seats, which this is very important later on. We probably won't get to it today, but when we do get to it, remember that I said this because I'll probably forget to mention it because how you do one thing is how you do everything. Let me just put it that way to foreshadow. But anyway, so the seat next to me was empty. It had been empty all morning, And oh, here's another imposter syndrome thing that I did. So my Aunt Karen, who has now passed, she had let me borrow, she has this, I think it's crocodile skin purse, which is very expensive, and she let me borrow it. So I had that purse. I took it to the event in an attempt to like look more high class than I really was. And since it was a really nice purse, I didn't want to put it on the floor. So since no one was sitting next to me, I put it on the seat next to me. And so with it being on the seat next to me, nobody was sitting there. So I said to Mike, I was like, hey, this seat is empty. Do you want to sit here? Even though he didn't really earn the seat, I was offering it to him. And I'm not trying to sound bitchy. It's just, again, I'm foreshadowing. So he ended up sitting there, which was really cool to me at the time because I was like, oh, now I don't have to be alone. Now I have this seminar buddy. So I was mostly asking him out of desperation and not wanting to be alone, which is also a very important point to point out. And I'm okay admitting that in hindsight. So anyway, lunch with Gary Vee. It was actually really cool. And I want to say, I know Gary Vee is kind of polarizing because of his language or whatever. I started following Gary Vee a long time ago, like, because this was 2018. I think I started following him in 2015 or 2016. I don't recall how I found out about him, but keep in mind, Instagram in 2015, 2016 era, there were no reels. I don't think there were stories. So it was just post. And I do think he dropped the F-bomb here and there, but it wasn't as like in your face. And, you definitely get the punch more in a video format, right? But also Instagram at that time, it was very like, this is what I had for dinner, this is my vacation, whatever. So to have someone be like so raw and so real, I actually found that refreshing. So I loved Gary Vee immediately, but then like stories came out and reels came out, and he does have this punchier in your face. But because I had already been familiar with him, it was much easier for me to digest because I do get it. If you just stumble upon him, I can see how he could be polarizing. But I had always loved Gary Vee. So this lunch with Gary Vee was so cool and motivating in the same way that I find him cool and motivating now, because he was basically like, just be yourself. Like when you promote your business and you're posting things, like post what you have for breakfast. If you're eating blueberries, because that's a thing. I don't know. He doesn't really talk about this anymore. He loves blueberries, and he used to post about that all of the time on his Instagram. And even at the event, like I think there was blueberries and something that we had for lunch. And he was like, that's why I post about why I like blueberries so much, because it like makes people feel like they know me and who I am. So he's like, if you like eggs for breakfast, be like, eggs, yummy. And that's exactly what he said. And he's such a powerful speaker. And that's how I remember, because he was basically like, just be yourself, which is his whole theme now. But it's so hard to do in a world where everybody's so mean and critical. But anyway, I remember him, even though he didn't say anything new, it was still really inspiring. And also another thing I thought was cool, because I just assumed because it was Gary Vee that he flew private or whatever, but he was like, he went overtime and he was like, I really got to go though, because I'm going to miss my flight. So I thought it was really cool that he flew commercial, even though it was probably business class or whatever. But the lunch with Gary Vee was really cool. And I still use him as inspiration for today, because at the end of the day, it is as simple as being yourself and speaking your truth and doing all the things. But it's not easy. So I like to follow him just to get these hits of inspiration, because sometimes you just need that reminder. So the lunch with Gary Vee was cool. And then we came back from lunch, which Mike obviously didn't have the ticket to the lunch with Gary Vee. So he was like, how was it? And I was like, oh my God, it was so cool. And I told him all about it. And he said he had asked someone else, and all they talked about was like what we had to eat. And I honestly don't even remember what we had to eat. Oh, that was another thing, because it was in this whole separate building. Again, I don't know how this works with the rodeos and stuff, but it was in this completely separate building. So it was like a nice catered lunch or whatever. So I think the food was good. I don't remember what we ate though, because I was just so enthralled by Gary Vee. So anyway, so Tony Robbins, Just to give also, because I know he can be controversial, I I'm fond of Tony Robbins because, man, I'll try to keep this story short, but I used to be really into fitness, and there was this guy that I used to follow. I don't know if he's still active. I should look him up. His name is Tom Venuto, and I loved Tom because he wrote this ebook. He actually later turned it into like a nice published book, but like in 2007, 2008, which I think it had already been out for many years at that point, but around 2007, 2008, I had bought this ebook online. It was called Burn the Muscle, Feed the Fat. And the reason I loved this ebook is because it was so simple, because a lot of fitness and fat loss is like all this extreme bullshit. Like you have to cut carbs, you have to do this, you have to do that. And Tom was just so straightforward. It's calories in, calories out. So if you want to eat a chocolate cake, that's fine if it fits in your calorie requirements, but he also goes into like why that's not necessarily ideal because it's not going to fuel your workouts and whatever. But he was just so straightforward, and I followed him for many, 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 many years. But he would always talk about one of the things that he did in his early fitness years to get his mindset straight was listen to Tony Robbins. And he talked about it all the time. And like many people, I just let it go in one ear and out the other until finally one time he said it. And I was like, I'm going to check out this Tony Robbins dude. And so I bought this. So this was probably circa, I don't know, 2012. I bought this 6-disc CD set of Tony Robbins. And it was so amazing. And for years, I would listen to these CDs over and over and over again because there was so much information, and each listen just brought out something new that I hadn't heard before, because it's kind of like you don't hear something until you're ready to hear it. Just like how Tom had been talking about Tony, and I didn't hear it until I was ready to hear it. So like these CDs were really the beginning of my inner growth journey. It took a lot more deeper inner work than just superficial listening to CDs, but that's what really kicked it off, was listening to these Tony Robbins CDs. And his events around that time, I think the shortest event he had was like 3 days. Most of them were a week long. So at this event that I went to, his portion, I think it was only 4 hours long, which in a day-long event is a long time, but for Tony Robbins, it's like not a lot of time at all. And at this time, I look at him differently now, and I'm not going to get into it, but I've gotten what I need from Tony Robbins, and I'll just leave it at that. But this event was so impactful. Tony was so amazing, and I already knew this about Tony from listening to his CDs and stuff, but he likes to involve motion. Meaning, if you go to one of his events, you are going to be standing up and jumping around and moving your body, because people talk about like they're sweating, they're whatever. This was no different with this event. Even though it was only 4 hours, we were definitely jumping around, doing all this crazy stuff. At one point, I kind of had an out-of-body experience because I was like, okay, I definitely feel like I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, but I mean, he knows what he's doing, right? Because when you're getting your body involved, like you just feel so like excited and motivated and ready to change the world. So before I get to the end, I just want to like scroll. Okay. So at the end of Tony's segment, he was like, we did this exercise. It was kind of like a meditation. I remember we were standing up, but he was playing this music and we had our eyes closed, and he was like, I want you to physically reach to the future and pull in what you desire. And I had gone to this seminar because I was like, I want to move to Hawaii and I want to be a writer. So I physically grabbed my desires, moved to Hawaii and be a writer, and I pulled it to my heart. And I know this might sound corny, but like in that moment, I knew it was going to happen. I just didn't know when, because I'll probably get to it in this video, but there were other obstacles besides the job and not having friends. But in that moment, I was like, it's going to happen. I don't care if it takes 3 years, it's going to happen. So then Then the meet and greet with Tony Robbins, and that's how it was advertised, the meet and greet. So keep in mind, Mike obviously didn't have the meet and greet ticket, so we parted ways. He had given me his business card to keep in touch. And so as I was waiting in line for Tony Robbins, I texted him just simply so that he could have my number too. I was like, "Hey, it's Angie. Nice meeting you." He texted me back immediately and he was like, "Hey, what are you doing for dinner?" And I hadn't even thought that far. I think it was like 8 o'clock at night. We had been there all day. I think this event started at like 8 o'clock in the morning. And then we had been jumping around. I was all sweaty. I was in line to meet Tony. So I hadn't even thought about dinner. And I was like, I don't know. And he was like, well, do you want to go out to eat? And I was like, sure. So anyway, and I'll get to that in a minute. So I'm waiting in line to meet Tony Robbins. And then I ran into the girls in front of me. And they were like, hey, we're going out to eat after this. Do you want to come with us? And I was like, oh, thank you so much for inviting me, but I'm actually going out to eat with Mike, the guy who was sitting next to me. And I remember one of the girls, she was like, oh, he was so hot, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because I didn't really think he was hot. Like, he wasn't ugly by any means. But I'm like considering her comment. And then I'm like, wait a minute. Am I making friends at this event? Because he invited me to dinner. I said yes. They invited me to dinner and I had to turn them down because I already had plans. And I had only been in Denver for like a little over a day. So I was like, is it impossible to make friends because I'm quote unquote too old? So that's why that was like super important, because this event made me realize that I was not too old to make friends, because I made friends with Matt. I made friends with the two girls in front of me. And by friends, I'm just talking like potential friends. And then I had made friends with Mike. So anyway, this meet and greet with Tony Robbins, it wasn't a meet and greet. It was like getting your picture taken. And it wasn't even a digital picture. And I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, there was like a booth where Tony was, and they were like ushering you into the booth. And there were some people outside who were like organizing the flow of people. Okay, so I can't remember exactly what they told me, but basically you were not to talk to Tony. Like, he talks to you first and that's it. Like, you're not to ask him any questions or whatever. You're there to get your picture taken. So it was not a meet and greet by any means. It was like you're getting your picture taken and you get the pleasure of Tony saying hi to you. So anyway, and it happens really fast because I got ushered into the booth and he was like, hi. Oh, and they tell him your name so that when you walk into the booth, he's like, oh, hi, Angie. So it like feels like you already know him, which I will admit that was a cool touch. And he shakes your hand, which Tony is huge for anyone who knows. I can't remember what he has, but he has something that makes him genetically huge. And so his hands are massive. I don't know if this is a Chicago thing or what. I love a firm handshake. And so the fact that his hands are huge just like made it an even bigger, better handshake. So I was like, oh, I like this. And then, okay, I'm so embarrassing. He was like, oh, I like the color of your hair. What do you call it? And I was like, so like, I didn't know how to respond. I was like, I don't know, red. And I was like, oh my God, I just sounded like such a sarcastic smartass to Tony Robbins. I don't think he took it that way, because like he just laughed and then we smiled and took the picture and then it was over. So it lasted like, maybe 15 seconds. Like, it was super fast. And then the shitty part is you don't even get a digital copy of the picture. It was like truly like an actual picture, which I still have, which I need to pause this video. Okay, I'm back. Obviously. These also are my notes from that event. Let me see. Focus, meaning when you start evaluating what you're getting, it's a transaction. I'm not prepared to read all my notes. But anyway, this is the picture. Me and Tony Robbins. Although, okay, now that I'm looking at this picture, I must have recently gotten my hair dyed because it is a pretty bright red. So I do get his question, but like, I don't know what he wanted me to tell him about my hair color. But anyway, that's the picture. I will never get rid of it. I should actually put it in my fireproof box now that I'm thinking about it. So anyway, I met Tony Robbins, and the thing I want to say about that, yes, it was really quick. It was not a meet and greet. In terms of the money, if I was truly going there to meet Tony Robbins and ask him a question and talk to him, then no, paying the extra money would not have been worth it. But I was there because I was determined to play at a higher level in life, no matter how difficult, scary, and uncertain. And if you remember how I was talking, like I'm talking all excited now because that's how I felt in the moment and I'm getting into the story. But if you recall at the beginning of this story, I almost didn't go to this event because I was so terrified. I felt like an imposter. I was like, I'm too old to make friends. I'm terrified of doing things alone. And I walked out of this event like so proud of myself. I felt like such a badass. I'm like, I can do scary things. I'm going to the next level of my life. I'm moving to Hawaii. I'm going to be a writer. I don't care how long it takes. I am doing these things because I knew I was capable. And that is the value of the ticket. So, and I say that because in my coaching, because I coach women glow up their inner and outer wealth. And it's not just about the money, it's about who you become in the process. And that's this story. And I wasn't planning on this being the only story. And I think it will be because I don't want this video to be too long, but it's so important. And I always say this event changed the trajectory of my life. And it wasn't hearing Gary Vee talk. It wasn't shaking Tony Robbins' hand and getting my picture taken with him. Although those were very cool things, it was about who I had to become. I had to step into my next level identity to become that person, and going to that event fulfilled that thing. So it's not about the things, it's who you become and stepping into your next level identity before the things actually happen. That's how you draw things to you. I moved to Hawaii and became a writer, which are in the coming chapters of this book, because of that event, because I stepped into the identity of the person who moves to Hawaii and becomes a writer and is determined to seek their next level, no matter how difficult, scary, or uncertain. Because your identity and who you believe you are and who you believe that, or what you believe that you're capable of, that overrides any limiting belief that you have. You still have to work on your limiting beliefs, but just stepping into that identity changes everything. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I did go out to eat with Mike. You know what? I'm going to save that for the next story. I'll have to make a note because that's still in chapter 11. I was hoping to get through chapter 12, but this is where it gets exciting because I still had some other limitations that I felt I had to overcome before I moved to Hawaii. So we will get to that in the next one. And by the next one, we will be making more progress. So I will see you in the next video.